This is a phone. A mobile phone to be specific. The device that was designed to connect people throughout the world. You could call anyone at any time. But now it feels like the call function is like an additional one. Because now it is typically used for this. Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Clubhouse. Those are the biggest platforms that are fighting for your attention. The things that you make in your labor itself are not the only product that you can provide. Your attention is a much more valuable product nowadays. A couple of years ago, I decided I needed a career change. I wanted to become a full-time filmmaker, and without the deadline, it's not a goal, it is simply a dream. So I made up the artificial deadline, which is called before I turn 30. The good news is I'm not 30 yet, I still got time. But the bad news is that I don't have much time. I'm 29 and a half years old. So recently I've been thinking about creativity a lot. I'm one of those people who can sit forever in front of a blank page not knowing what to write. Now, in order to reset my creativity, I want to try something. I want to cut myself off of endless stream of information in order to create, let's call it, informational vacuum. This way, at least I hope, my brain will start increasing its creativity. The rules are simple. I'm not allowed to read news or even books. I will stop using the apps that were designed to entertain me, like Instagram and YouTube. I will limit my listening to music and movie watching. The less information enters my brain, the better it is. My objective here is to create boredom, the thing we are so afraid of, in order to boost my creativity. This is day 1. Let's go. Yeah, this is me a couple of hours into the experiment. Already bored as f***. Turns out I'm not allowed to do all the fun things I love doing. So the only things left to do are filming, screenwriting, and sports.
Help!
Well, maybe that should be done indoors. If there is nothing to do besides being productive, let's try being productive.
You may ask why I said I was going to be productive and the only thing I seem to be doing is writing. Because this is the main problem that I have. I do not need to find some motivation or to exercise my will in order to pick up the camera and start filming. The problem that I have is that without a script there is nothing to film. And I really hate writing. I started this whole experiment simply because I need to put some of my ideas into words, and I always seem to be lacking them. I tried some methods that were supposed to make me write more. The most popular and the one that worked at least a little bit was Stephen King's method, which stated that I simply need to write at least a page of anything in order to kickstart this process. But that kickstart wasn't doing much for me, as I would get out of breath in a couple of pages. I've always felt like I could say what I need to say within the number of words that would fit on a single, standard page. The inclination towards math and physics would eventually lead me to the lack of creative ideas and to poor ability to express myself. Or I'm just lazy. Anyway, this little experiment that I'm doing is hopefully going to help me overcome it. So, why have I decided that this method would work? There is this really old video on my channel that contains information about an experiment, but so you wouldn't have to go there and watch it, I'll describe it here really briefly. Basically, it was an experiment on extreme isolation, where people were deprived of almost any stimuli there is. A mask to cover eyes, a pillow to cover ears, weird-looking costumes to reduce the sense of touch. It turns out that when you deprive a brain of stimuli, it's starting to generate them on its own. After just a couple of days, those people started seeing and hearing lots of hallucinations. I do not want to see or hear them, but what I think is that this small reduction in stimuli would spark my brain's creativity.
This is so bizarre how automatic this usage of the phone has become. When I woke up, I took my phone and without even looking much, I automatically located the app that I needed, and only then I remembered about the experiment and stopped myself. This is not a good sign. It takes me some time to find a useful app on my phone that I occasionally need, but something like YouTube I can find in a matter of seconds even with my eyes closed. Why don't I simply delete those apps for the time of this experiment, you might ask? I agree that it is easier, but my objective is to be able to live with them without dissolving myself. Let's be honest, sooner or later I will return to using them, and when I do return, I need to use them as little as possible. So I've got to train my will now instead of just deleting them all at once and thus making it easier on myself.
Hi there. Remember I said at the beginning that I would limit my listening to music instead of not listening to it at all. This is because of situations like this. Right now I'm packing to go to the gym, and there I would have to listen to music. The only choice that I got is either to listen to music that I like, or to something like this. I'm choosing my playlist. Well, turns out that it's much more difficult to do than I thought. I mean, this cutting myself off of information. Here is why. A couple of days ago, I spent an entire day in a hotel a couple of thousand miles away from home. That is thanks to my job. This job aspect interferes with the experiment quite significantly, because sometimes I have to work during the day, sometimes during the night. And at work I have to go through various documents and procedures, which eliminates my ability to shield off of information and be bored. But that's okay, we'll have jobs and responsibilities which we have to do daily. That's why being able to incorporate this thing that I'm doing at least partly into my life is already a great achievement. Then there are some situations in which doing something productive is not really an option. Here is what I mean. Imagine you're sitting in a line to the doctor for a couple of hours. I don't know about you, but I cannot write a script or simply come up with an idea when I'm surrounded by screaming children and coughing people. So at that particular moment, an option listening to music doesn't seem that bad. And it turns out there are a lot of situations like this one in life. That's why writers often choose to move to remote locations like cabin in the woods in order to finish a certain project. Now, let's talk about the outcomes of this experiment, because I've been doing this experiment for the last couple of weeks. Sorry for the lack of footage, but there is not much to film when everything I do is writing, doing my job, and running on a treadmill. The most important conclusion that I want to share with you is that driving a car without music is kinda sad and boring and weird. You remember that song by 21 Pilots that is called Car Radio? It feels exactly like it. Yeah. Okay, let's get a little bit more serious and get to the real conclusions now. So, let's talk about the benefits and the drawbacks of this experiment. The most important aspect that this experiment was all about is the ability to concentrate and to work. And indeed, it becomes easier once you remove the distraction, being mostly the phone. But additionally to that benefit, we receive another two. It turns out that we waste tremendous amount of time on our devices doing nothing, and once you get that time back, you can do a lot more during the day than ever before. Plus, you are no longer comparing yourself to anyone else, because you no longer open apps like Instagram. That's why you start feeling much better. You know what I'm talking about? Once you open Instagram, everyone there is having a grand old time and you seem to be the only one who achieved nothing. Despite the fact that this is far from the truth,
you still feel like a loser. Now the constant comparison and consequently that feeling are gone. But what about the drawbacks? Frankly speaking, there is none. Ultimately, every person decides for himself. Some people are comfortable with the amount of time they spend online using these apps and do not want to change a thing. But at the same time, cases of depression, loneliness, and dissatisfaction with one's life have skyrocketed in the previous decade. Well, maybe this is just a coincidence, but I think we forgot how to live the real life trying to substitute it with the virtual one. Real life is tough. It's full of disappointments, tragedy, anger, and a sense of desperation. But unfortunately, it's the only one that matters. There have been numerous quotes describing how short life is and how quickly time runs out, so I'm not going to try to come up with my own. What I simply want you to do is to answer a question. Are you satisfied with what you spent your time on?